This is going to be our home now. The rest of the stuff is coming today, so please take care of it. What? Why are you making these decisions on your own? Oh, by the way, Anna is coming too, so make sure to welcome her. I had noticed that my husband's family started visiting more often after we moved into the fancy high-rise condo, but I never expected anything like this. As soon as my husband came home from work, I asked him, "Is your mother and her family going to live here?" "Oh yeah, that's happening today, isn't it?" he replied casually. "What are you talking about?" I was shocked. "Didn't I mention it? They're moving in with us today." "Haha," he laughed, not realizing how upset I was. I was speechless. "Don't just stand there. Get ready to make dinner. We're celebrating today." At that point, I was furious. How could he think this was okay? "We can live here because of me, you know," I said. "What are you talking about?" "That's not true," he argued back. As we were talking, my mother-in-law arrived. "If you hate living with us so much, why don't you just leave?" she said, throwing an envelope on the table. "What's this?" I asked. "It's severance money from us, $110,000. Take it, get divorced, and leave. We'll keep the house," she said, smirking with her family. At that moment, I made up my mind. They're such fools. I'm so lucky, I thought. "Understood. I'll leave right away," I said. I quickly packed my bags and left the house, feeling overjoyed. But this wasn't the end. I couldn't stop laughing, thinking about what would happen to my in-laws next. My name is Sarah, and I work as a bank employee. I thought I would have a happy life married to Kevin, but marriage doesn't always go as planned. I realized this when I first met my mother-in-law. "So, you're Sarah. What do you do for a living?" "I'm a bank employee," I replied. "Oh, a bank employee, huh? I guess you don't have to be too smart to do that," she said, clearly trying to put me down. This happened the first time we met before the wedding. Kevin, sitting next to me, acted like he didn't hear and just smoked his cigarette. "Well, let's get along from now on," she said. Yes, nice to meet you," I replied, wondering if everything would be okay. But after we got married, my husband was kind, and we didn't have to interact much with my mother-in-law. "Are you sure it was a good idea to marry a man with such a modest salary?" she asked out of nowhere one day. "What's wrong all of a sudden?" I asked. "Well, my mom used to say such things, but now I just feel pathetic." "It's okay, don't worry," I assured him. Kevin had always been insecure, even when we were dating. He was intimidated when he found out I was a bank employee, but I never cared much about my partner's financial status. Since then, we've had a modest but fun life. "What are you planning to do about where we live?" my father asked me a few months after we got married. "I think we're fine as we are now. We don't have any particular needs," I replied. "Actually, a spot has opened up in the high-rise condo. What do you think?" he asked. "A high-rise condo?" I was surprised. My father owned a high-rise condo. He was a company president but had handed over the business to my brother and was now living a relaxed life. Of course, my husband knew about this. "If you're interested, you can move in immediately." "Got it. I'll discuss it with Kevin," I said. I talked to Kevin that night. "Kevin, are you interested in living in a high-rise condo?" "A high-rise condo? It would be amazing to live in such a place," Kevin said, showing excitement I hadn't seen before. Seeing him smile made me happy too. "Actually, my dad offered us to live in the high-rise condo." "Really?" "Yes," I replied. Kevin, overwhelmed with excitement, suddenly grabbed my shoulders. "Calm down a bit." Sorry, he said, realizing how excited he was. And so it was decided that we would live in a high-rise condo. However, for me, it was the beginning of a nightmare. "I'll contact Dad then, okay," I said. "Thanks, but I can't believe I'm going to live in a high-rise condo." Kevin's eyes sparkled. After getting Kevin's approval, I called my dad the next day. "Hello, Dad," Kevin agreed, so we decided to move in. "That's great. It's already cleaned and ready for you anytime." "Got it. Thank you," I replied. Then I remembered something important and asked my father, "By the way, how will we handle the rent?" "Don't worry about that. As long as you live there, you won't need to pay rent." "Really?" "Of course, it's all for my dear daughter." My husband and I started preparing to move right away. We moved in just 1 week later. Perhaps we were both excited to live in the high-rise condo. "So this is a high-rise condo. It's incredible. I never imagined we could live in such a place," Kevin said. "It's like a dream, all thanks to your father." "Indeed, we need to express our gratitude," Kevin replied. Although we were initially confused by the larger space of the high-rise condo, it only took a week to get used to it. I had concerns about whether someone like me should live there, but those concerns faded away. About 2 months after we started living in the high-rise condo, Kevin said, "My sister Anna wants to come visit. Is that okay?" Kevin had an older sister named Anna. I heard from Kevin that she had been married but got divorced because she was fed up with her husband and had returned to her parents' home. That's fine, but why does she want to come here?" I asked. I hadn't really talked much with her before, so I didn't quite understand why she wanted to visit. I mentioned our new place and she said she wanted to come over. That's fine as long as it's on the weekend, I replied. I'll let her know then. When Saturday arrived, the doorbell rang, and I went to open it. Standing there was a woman dressed head to toe in designer clothes. I was so surprised that I stepped back. It's been a while. Do you remember me? She asked. Of course, Anna. Please, come in. My sister-in-law walked in and started looking around the house, inspecting every corner. She checked each room, nodding like she was satisfied with something. Is there something on your mind? I asked, curious. I was just admiring the house. Ordinary people can't live in such a place, right? It's all thanks to my father, I explained. We moved to the living room and started chatting casually. Then, out of nowhere, my sister-in-law made a snide remark. At the time, I didn't understand why she said that. It must be nice to be you, Sarah. Don't you think so, Kevin? I don't really think about it, Kevin replied. But this house is all thanks to your father-in-law, right? I felt uneasy and asked, did I do something wrong? Not at all. It's just that our family wasn't wealthy, she replied. Kevin had told me before that their father had passed away when they were in middle school, and since then they had faced many hardships. I started to think maybe she was jealous of me. That might be why she was wearing all those designer clothes. Well, I'll be going now. I'll visit again soon. Take care. For about 2 hours, the conversation mainly revolved around their hardships and how lucky I was. Kevin barely spoke during the whole time, just silently listening to his sister. I'm sorry my sister is like that, Kevin said afterward. I kind of figured, I replied. I'll make sure to warn her next time, Kevin promised, but less than a month later she visited us again, and this time she wasn't alone. Sorry for intruding, she said, barging in and plopping down on the sofa. Today I brought our mom along, but the door was locked. Oh, Kevin gave me a spare key, she said casually. What? I was shocked. I wanted to ask Kevin about it immediately, but he wasn't home. I had a bad feeling this was going to cause trouble. Then the most difficult person spoke up. It's not that big of a deal. What's the problem with having a spare key? The issue is that I wasn't informed about it, I replied. Maybe Kevin doesn't trust you, my mother-in-law said. I think so too, Anna chimed in. With both of them against me, I felt helpless. From that day on, my life became completely different. When I came home from work, I often found my sister-in-law and mother-in-law in the house. They would help themselves to the food in the fridge and move things around without asking. This isn't right, don't you think? I asked Kevin. Even if I say something, they won't listen. Maybe it's best to just let them do what they want, Kevin said. I can't stand living like this. Please talk to them. I was so frustrated with my husband for doing nothing and with myself for feeling powerless. Okay, I'll talk to them. Will you be there with me? Kevin asked. If you're going to speak up properly, then I don't mind, I replied. As usual, when my husband confronted them, they didn't pay any attention. Sarah must have put you up to this, right? Come on, Kevin, be more assertive, they said. That's right, you're the head of the household. You should have your own opinions, they added. My husband seemed to be thinking about something, looking down. Don't say weird things. Please leave, I finally told them. But then my husband unexpectedly turned against me. You're the one who should be quiet, he said. I was shocked. My husband was siding against me. He had completely given in to his mother and sister. They took advantage of Kevin's lack of confidence and his inability to say no. Now, I felt completely alone. I was wrong, my husband said with a new sense of confidence. What my sister and mother said is right. From now on, I'm going to express my own opinions. The two of them smirked and looked at us with satisfaction. From then on, things became one-sided. I've decided that my mom and sister can come and go as they please, my husband declared. Wait, you can't just make decisions like that without me, I protested. The decision is made, and you have no say in it, he replied, ignoring my concerns. His mother and sister backed him up. Sarah, that's enough, they said. Kevin is the head of this household. As his wife, you just need to follow him. There's a spare room, right? My mother-in-law asked. No way, I responded, but they continued. It's a waste to have an unused room, so we'll use it. The balance of power had clearly shifted in their favor. The room, which my father had allowed us to use, was now considered theirs. Given the situation, I had no choice but to tough it out. I decided to focus on my work and not worry about what was happening at home. 6 months later, my dedication to work paid off. You've been doing really well lately. How about taking on a higher position? My boss asked. Me? I've been watching your work, and I think you're the right person for the job. Thank you. I'll continue to do my best. It was unexpected but the happiest thing that had happened to me in a long time. However, there was a problem. You've been coming home late recently. What have you been up to? my husband asked suspiciously. Just work, really. Aren't you having an affair? If you don't believe me, go ahead and check, I replied. This was when my mother-in-law and sister-in-law would chime in. Getting so defensive makes you look even more suspicious, Anna said. Anna might be right, my mother-in-law added, but honestly, who would be interested in Sarah with her looks? They clapped their hands and laughed together, enjoying themselves at my expense. Before, they used to come over maybe 3 times a week, but now they were at our house almost every day. One day, my mother-in-law came up to me and said something completely unexpected. Do you even understand why you can live in a place like this? A woman like you doesn't belong here. I thought to myself, there she goes again. You can't even do household chores properly. You're useless here, do you get that? She continued. I wanted to snap back, but I knew that nothing I said would improve the situation, so I stayed silent. Eventually, my mother-in-law got bored and went back to her room. Just as I was about to start preparing dinner, my sister-in-law walked in. I heard the conversation earlier. There's never a moment of peace. You should really understand your place. You're like a maid in this house. I work hard too, you know, and I might sound bad, but I earn more than Kevin, I said. Then you should contribute that money to the household expenses for us, she shot back. I couldn't agree with her. I wasn't living in luxury. I was actually paying for most of our daily expenses like utilities and groceries. Kevin seemed to have forgotten that, and my mother-in-law and sister-in-law didn't even know the reality. I often wondered what would happen if I stopped paying. Then why don't you work, Anna? I asked. Why should I have to do that? She replied, completely serious. I almost envied her ability to say such things. It was a mystery where she went every day without working. So where do you go every day? I asked. I don't need to tell you that, she said, avoiding eye contact. It was clear she was involved in something she couldn't openly talk about. Is that so? Then I'll just assume you're wandering around every day without working, I said seriously. Angered, my sister-in-law threw a mug from the table at me. It didn't hit me, but the mug shattered into pieces. Why did you dodge that? That was my favorite cup. Since it's your fault, clean it up, she demanded. I silently began cleaning up the broken pieces while she stood there watching and laughing. I thought about throwing the shards back at her, but I refrained. You're in the way standing there, she said. I'm just watching, she added as I cleaned up. After a few minutes, I tried to leave, but my sister-in-law stopped me again. Remember, if you say something weird next time, it'll be much worse. I understand. I'll be careful, I said, though I didn't mean it inside. As I watched my sister-in-law leave, I thought to myself, don't get too cocky, you'll get what's coming to you soon. Then one day, as usual, when I returned home from shopping, the house was in chaos. There were cardboard boxes everywhere, and my mother-in-law was bustling around. What are you doing? I asked. This is going to be our home now. The rest of our stuff is arriving today, so please take care of it, she said. What? Why are you deciding this on your own? I asked, shocked. Oh, by the way, Anna will be coming too. Please welcome her. I immediately asked my husband, who had just returned from work, your mother and her family are saying they're going to live here. Oh yeah, that was today, wasn't it? What are you talking about? Huh? Didn't I mention it? They're moving in with us today, he said, laughing. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't think of what to say next. Don't just stand there. Get ready to make dinner. We're celebrating today, he added. At those words, my anger reached its peak. How can this be allowed? After all, we can live here thanks to me? Huh? What are you talking about? That's not true, he replied. Are you serious? You're just obeying everything your family says, I said. What did you say? Say that again, my husband said, raising his hand toward me. At that moment, it wasn't fear that I felt. I was shocked at how much my husband had changed, going from unassertive to someone who might hit me. But I wasn't scared. I was in disbelief. Go ahead, hit me if you dare, I said. He slowly lowered his arm, apparently intimidated, but then started laughing. What's so funny? I asked. I just remembered why we got married. You should be thankful you could marry me, he replied, laughing. What are you talking about? You might not know this, but I married you because nobody else was interested. I didn't marry you out of love. It's annoying, but I did it because you earn more than me. That's what Mom told me to do, he said. Anger boiled up inside me. So that was the reason, I thought. He continued, since you're married to someone like me, it's only natural for you to contribute to the living expenses. Ever since we got married, I had always been the one providing the money whenever needed. I never thought my husband was such a terrible person. That's mutual. You only bring home money. I never thought you could be so boring, he retorted. As we argued, my mother-in-law arrived. If you hate living together so much, why don't you just leave? She said. Why should I have to do that? I asked. We don't need someone like you in this place, she said. My sister-in-law agreed. Sarah is unnecessary. Nothing will change if you're gone. My mother-in-law then threw an envelope on the table. What is this? I asked. It's severance money from us. There's $10,000 in the envelope. Take it, get divorced, and leave. We'll take the house, she said, smirking. At that moment, I made up my mind. The high-rise condo we were living in was technically in my name, though I was only borrowing it for free from my father. I thought of a way to retaliate against them. Such foolish people, I thought. This is an opportunity for me. I decided to act immediately. Understood. I'll leave right away, I said. I thought you would put up more of a fight, my husband sneered. Well, that's the kind of woman she was. Too bad, but I don't want to see your face anymore, so leave quickly, my mother-in-law added. I quickly packed my bags and left the house, almost dancing with glee. I couldn't stop laughing as I imagined what would happen to my in-laws next. I decided to go back to my parents' house to inform my father about the situation. Why have you come back suddenly? My father asked. I've been kicked out of the house, I replied. Kicked out? How did that happen? He asked, concerned. I explained everything that had happened that day and the events leading up to it. My father's face turned red with anger as I spoke. After I finished, he was angrier than I had ever seen him. Let's kick them out immediately, he said, but I stopped him. Wait, Dad. I have a better idea, I said. What kind of idea? He asked. I shared the plan I had thought of when leaving the house. My father nodded in agreement. That's a brilliant idea, right? This way it benefits you as well, and I get my revenge. So you'll take care of it. Yes, don't worry, he assured me. The next day, I contacted my husband about the apartment. I have no intention of giving it back, I told him. I know, but the ownership is still mine, so I'm thinking of transferring it to you. Then it will truly be yours, right? I see. I don't want to cause you any trouble. I'll handle the paperwork. Is that okay? Okay, I'll leave it to you, he agreed. All right, I'll also send the divorce papers by mail. Take care, I said, hanging up the phone. I could sense my husband's joy just before I hung up. A week later, the divorce was finalized and the paperwork for the high-rise condo was completed. All that was left was to wait. Hey, I got a bill for $6,000. What's the meaning of this? Explain. My furious ex-husband called me a month later. It was hard to suppress my laughter at his reaction. Well, it's a high-rise condo, you know. Did you think you could live there for free? But the rent was free until now, wasn't it? Indeed, when I was there, I laughed. This is no joke, he shouted so loudly that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. It was free because I was there. But now that it's yours, you need to pay the rent. We're not going to pay that. You can choose not to, but remember, the owner of the apartment is my father, I reminded him. After a moment of silence, my mother-in-law took the phone. I heard from Kevin what you did. That was unnecessary of you. Unnecessary? I believe what I did was entirely justified. Please don't be mistaken, I responded. What an impudent woman you are, she said angrily. It doesn't matter to me. Haha. You shouldn't have given me $10,000 then, I provoked her. I thought I wouldn't have to deal with them anymore, but my words got to her. We will absolutely not pay, she said. Is that so? That's fine by me, but don't say I didn't warn you if my father decides to sue, I replied. My mother-in-law seemed shaken, losing her previous confidence. Aren't you ashamed to rely on your father? Not at all. It's more shameful for someone who tried to manipulate their son to their own ends, don't you think? I said. Realizing she was at a disadvantage, my mother-in-law abruptly hung up the phone. She was just running away. I immediately informed my father about the conversation. I see then I need to do something about it for my daughter, he said. I'm counting on you, I replied. My former in-laws acted impulsively, thinking only of their convenience, and this was the result. Such a pitiful family. They would face more difficulties from now on, and I would just wait and enjoy watching. Time passed, and my ex-husband and his family continued living in the high-rise condo without paying rent. Eventually, my father had to take action. I just billed them for the past due rent, he said. Really? We can't ignore this any longer. It will be a good lesson for them, I replied. Then a new revelation came to light. There were traces of unauthorized purchases made with a credit card in my name. A lawyer introduced by my father was hired, and preparations for a lawsuit began, demanding reimbursement from my ex-husband and his family. Why should we pay you? My sister-in-law objected, mostly because the purchases were expensive branded bags and clothes. How can you say that after shopping with someone else's money? This is clear theft, I said. It's pathetic to fuss over such trivial matters. Besides, those purchases were made before your divorce, so I think they're invalid, she argued. Unfortunately, that logic doesn't apply. You and I are strangers now, I said. I don't care about that, she replied, but then she hung up, escaping as usual. However, they couldn't escape this time and had to make the payment. They must pay the rent for the apartment, but that family doesn't have the means to pay. One person eventually came begging for forgiveness. What are you saying now? We can't afford to pay such an amount. We'd be ruined even if we took out loans. You understand, right? My mother-in-law was trying to get sympathy through tears. It's all your responsibility, aren't you ashamed? I asked, knowing she was fully aware of the situation. It's impossible. Please make sure to pay the full amount, I insisted. Afterward, it seems they continued to live in poverty. The three of them, having lost their place to live, returned to their old family home, which was in a dilapidated state due to neglect. Eventually, they realized they needed more money to live and decided to sell it for a cheap price. Sarah, please help me. I received a call from my ex-husband Kevin, but I ignored it and hung up. In the end, I was able to live in the high-rise condo they had left. Of course, I didn't have to pay any rent. My work was going well, and from now on I would live my life putting my happiness first.